Welcome to Ask the Divorce Whisperer. My name is Marta Papa, and I'm your host for this live Facebook broadcast where we try and demystify divorce for those people that are facing that crisis. So welcome. So glad you've joined us. We broadcast on the first and third Friday of every month at 1:00 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I choose an expert that I've worked with in the past who knows a lot about divorce or divorce procedures or people or psychology or kids, anything that might be that someone facing divorce could be struggling with and want more information about and more help with. So that's the purpose of this broadcast. And today, I'm so lucky to have Dr. Tim Jordan, a behavioral pediatrician, behavioral specialist with kids. I'll let him describe his title. He can do better than I can, with us today. And let me just take a minute and let him say hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So I always ask the guests this one question, and then we talk about their answer to this question for a half an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Dr. Tim Jordan the question I ask every expert, which is, if you had someone you really cared about who was going through divorce, and you were very worried about them, and you could only give them one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice be? So let's pose that to Dr. Jordan. If you could only give one piece of advice to someone facing the crisis of divorce, what would that be?
Well, first off, I'm going to cheat because before my answer, I would say, do everything you can to not get divorced.
Yes.
Go to counseling, go on retreats, figure out what's triggering each other, blah, blah, blah. Because I think a lot of couples, if they really invested the time and energy, I think a lot of them probably could work it out and move on together. Not all, but probably a bunch. So if you can avoid that for your children, that's great. So besides that preface, I guess I would say, from the point of view of kids, because I work with girls, grade school through college age, I would say, listen. Listen to each of your kids because they're all different. Listen as far as how are they experiencing it? How are they feeling? What kind of thoughts are they having about both parents? But even more importantly, what are their thoughts about themselves? Because as kids experience adversities in life, whether they're losing a friend or whether they got ditched by their friends or whether or not their parents are getting divorced, whatever the adversity may be, they always go inside their heads when they have all those feelings going on, and they start to ask themselves questions like, what does this mean about me? Why are my parents getting divorced? And so then they answer those questions in their head with their own private logic, which is often faulty and untrue. And that can really come back to bite them in a lot of different ways.
So how interesting. So, I mean, if I could sort of sum up what you just said, tell me if I'm correct or not, it's to listen. The best advice you can give is to listen to your children, listen to them and listen to each of them, because they each are going to have different experiences, probably based on their age and where they fall in the lineup of 5 kids or whatever. Listen to them. Is that correct?
Yes. A lot of parents, as they're going through the process of deciding to get divorced, or they're separated, or they get divorced, or if they start dating, or if they remarry and all that, I think a lot of parents become distracted. And I think what I find for a lot of girls is that their parents they're trying to kind of rush the process because they want their kids to be okay. I think with good intentions, they want their kids to be okay and not have to suffer too much. And so they're trying to make sure everybody's feeling great. And a lot of times they don't take the time to stop and say, how are you feeling about this? What's going on for you? All along the way, at every step in that process.
I can say that I see that in my practice. When is this going to be over? When is this going to be over? Not what are we going to do? and how are the kids going to process this, and how much time do they need to process this before I go on to dating, etc. That's not usually the question that they ask me. It's, how soon can this be over? How can this be lasting so long, taking so long? I agree with that. They do seem to be in a rush about it. And if they're that, if they're that entwined with the legal process and trying to push it along so that it gets over, they probably don't have time to be listening to what their kids are feeling like through the different stages of the divorce.
So as you know, obviously, this is a big loss. And like any loss, there's a grieving process, if you will. So they're losing the family that they had, the way it used to look. They're losing time with their parents because they may only see their parents half the time, or, some kids only see one parent maybe a fourth of the time or less. It's also like the loss of like this vision of my family. And that's a hard thing for kids to wrap their heads around. It doesn't happen right away. Just like if you lost someone to a death, everybody grieves differently in their own way, in their own time. And so that's why all along the way, I think we need to be able to sit with our kids and have enough down, quiet time where if they want to talk, if they want to share, there's time. If they notice their parents are rushing around and they're busy and they're distracted, then a lot of times kids think, well, I guess they don't have the time for me, or they'll see their parents on edge because of everything going on for good reasons. So if parents are not taking care of themselves, a lot of kids decide, I guess I shouldn't share things because it might tip my parents over the edge.
Yeah.
And so they hold on to it, and then it builds up and it builds up, and then it leaks out as all kinds of unhealthy things.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought, too, of for parents to recognize that this is a loss, even though almost like a death. It is the death. It's the death of the family that they've known, and cherished. And yet both parents are still there. Both parents are still alive, but they don't have the parents together. They aren't doing family things together. They aren't celebrating holidays together. Their parents aren't sleeping in the same room, living under the same roof. It's a loss of that family, even though they may still get to see each other, see both parents. That's still a loss for the child. And so, recognizing that, do you have any suggestions about how parents can help their children process that loss?
Well, yes, a lot of things, because I work with lots of kids who've been through divorces, my retreats, my counseling practice. I think first of all, I think if the parents can do whatever they need to do personally and as a couple to be able to get along, because they're wanting their kids to move along. They want their kids to kind of get through it, but they keep fighting. If they keep arguing, if they keep bad mouthing the other parent, if they're trying to use, or they're using their son or daughter as a go between, then it keeps it fresh. It's hard to move on when there's still stuff going on. There's still anger and fighting and, bad energy, if you will. And so I think whatever parents can do to sort of take care of that part, that helps kids to move on and to slowly process it. And I think a lot of kids do need to go to a counselor like me, just because it's nice to have someone outside of mom and dad where they can be more open and honest, perhaps, and run things by, and not feel afraid like they're choosing one parent over the other, or they don't feel like they're in the middle. They just need someone for them to hear them and to let them know, I get it. I see you. It makes sense. You're not alone. You're going to get through this. Sometimes it's easier for them to hear that from a third party than it is from mom and dad, especially if mom and dad are embroiled in mischief, anger, drama, power struggles, whatever.
Yeah. Wow. I can really see that. I can really see that. And from my own divorce, I can really see that, that we had one child, a daughter on 10 years old when I got divorced. And she she really needed to talk about what it felt like, but she told the counselor she didn't want to talk to me, and she didn't want to talk because she thought dad would feel jealous about that. And she
Yeah.
didn't want to talk to dad because that felt dishonorable to me. She thought it would. It didn't, but she thought it would. And so there was nowhere to go except an outside third party, where she didn't have to please that party, and she didn't have to worry about, well, I'm spending too much time talking to dad, mom's going to get jealous, or vice versa. It was a safe place where she didn't have to take care of us. She could take care of herself. And that's what the counselor reported back. She needs to take care of herself, and she feels like she needs to take care of the two of you. So don't ask her to be the go-between. She's not she's not the reporter between the two of you. She's not the carrier of information between the two of you.
It's amazing to me also. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's
No,
amazing
no.
how many kids blame themselves.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, why are you blaming yourself for your parents fighting, your parents' divorce, or whatever? And they'll say things like, well, they fight about me a lot. Like maybe the parents don't agree with their parenting, so they're arguing about the discipline, or they're arguing about decisions, or whatever it might be. And what I tell the girls is, if you went out and robbed a bank and your parents had to come and get you in the jailhouse, and they started fighting about that, it's still not your fault, because your parents could handle the situation by talking to each other and being peaceful and working together and collaborating. And so anytime they choose to argue, fight, and all that, that's their choice. That's on them. That's not on you. No matter, even if they're arguing about you because you're flunking a class, or because you got in trouble, or they found a bag of pot in the car, or whatever, it's still not about you. It's excuse me, and it's not your fault. A lot of kids carry blame and guilt that doesn't belong to them.
What a wonderful thing to say to these kids, that it's not your fault. They think, well, if I'd cleaned up my room, and if I'd gotten an A in science, and if I practiced the piano more, then they wouldn't be fighting, because they choose to fight over those kinds of things when it's really other stuff that they're fighting about, but they choose to fight over things that the child does or doesn't do, which really isn't the issue, but it makes the child think they're the issue. And so what a wonderful thing that you can say, hey, even if you robbed a bank and they were fighting, it's not about you. It's their inability to communicate and rise to the occasion and be the adults in the room, and be the leaders in the room, and find out what made you feel like you needed to rob a bank. And how can we help you not feel like that anymore, so you don't have that urge to do that. What a great thing to be able to reassure the child that there's nothing that they could have done to prevent this.
The other place I see where girls need more awareness, perspective, is when their parents start to date other people and or get married. And I've seen so many girls over the years who, I was just thinking, it just pops in my head, a girl whose parents got divorced, and then her dad moved out of state, and she would fly to see him, or he would come into town. And so she saw him a couple times a month for a weekend for a while, and then it became once a month, and then a little bit less than that. And he didn't call as much. Then he got a girlfriend, and this girlfriend had 2 kids, and then the girlfriend moved in with the dad. And so when this girl and her sister went to visit the dad out of state, they no longer had their bedroom, because the girlfriend's kids had the room. So they were down in the basement in this makeshift room. So they felt really displaced. And then the dad stopped calling almost ever. And they only saw him a few times a year. And so what those girls, the girl I saw mostly, started to internalize was why doesn't my dad call me? Why doesn't my dad send me a Valentine? Why doesn't my dad, call me my birthday? I guess it's because I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe I'm unlovable. I'm not important. His other family now is more important than me. None of that's true, but that's what they oftentimes internalize.
Yes.
And then that will obviously affect everything in their life if they feel like they're unlovable and unworthy and not deserving and all that. So a lot of times they need help with untangling that, reframing it, I tell them all the time, you're not in charge of what your parents do. You can ask for what you want, but that doesn't always help. You're not in charge of that. You're not in charge of that part of the story, but you are in charge of what you make of it. You're in charge of what story you walk away with. So if you're walking away from your dad not calling you or spending time with you with the story of it's me, I'm not good enough, there's something wrong with me, I'm not lovable. That's one story you could walk away with. I understand why you might. I don't think it's true, but I get it. Or you also could walk away with my dad's missing out and my dad's distracted with his new family. And I don't like it. But it's not about me. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not going to take that on. And that is the truth. And that's easier said than done. But I think that's one of the things I do in my counseling practice is I help girls reframe what's going on so that they don't make bad sense of it.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. So you help them. I mean, I love what you say. You're not in charge of what your parents do. You're only in charge of, what did you say, how you interpret that?
Yeah. What you make of it. What's the story? What are you going to walk away? You could spend your whole life thinking to yourself, my dad didn't call because there's something wrong with me, or I'm not pretty enough or good enough or whatever, or not deserving. And you could, have your whole life have that be part of your belief system, or you could learn to step back and say, wait a minute, I'm not willing for that to be my story. I can see how it's causing me lots of grief in my life. And it's not true. I'm not going to let it be true because it isn't true.
Yeah.
I'm going to reformulate that and reframe it so that I make good sense of it.
So it sounds like in helping them know how to reframe, that they can reframe and how to reframe, that they can prevent their self-esteem from being just eroded for the rest of their lives, and make the story about what he's missing out on instead of what I'm not. I'm not enough, and so that's why he doesn't take the time to call me or come weekends or send a Valentine. That's really his loss, and I'm not in charge of what he does. I'm not in charge of what he does. Wow, what an empowering thing. How young down can you do that? Like how young of a kid
Grade
can
school.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow,
I mean, obviously if you're
awesome.
17, you might be a little bit more with it and all,
Yeah,
but even a girl
right.
who's, 8, 9, 10, I think I would talk to them at their level, but it's not too
Right.
early to help them start to see things in a different way.
Yeah.
Because I don't want them to develop, if they have those thoughts and those thoughts start to become beliefs, and then they've been beliefs for 6 years or 8 years, it's a little bit harder to untangle.
Yes.
And then, by the time you're in 17 and you're dating, that obviously interferes, because if you feel like I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, and I don't deserve to be loved, then you're going to do all kinds of things when it comes to boys and or girls. That's not healthy. You're
Yeah.
more willing to have, you're probably not going to have very good boundaries. You're probably going to give up more than you want. You're probably not going to take care of yourself because you don't deserve it, quote unquote. You do, but their belief is I don't deserve it.
Yeah. So if you can get to them, it depends on when their parents divorce and how old they are, but if you can get to them at an earlier age, it sounds like you can reverse those wheels, or at least expand the way they can interpret the world and what the adults in their world are doing to, well, it might not be me, it might be them. It might be my issue, it might be their issue. I wonder how I could rewrite this story, thinking that it might be their issue, and they can do that with you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. There's one of my favorite authors. His name is Anthony DeMello. He's passed away a long time ago, but I read a bunch of his books. So one of the things I learned a long time ago from him was he said he always wanted to write a book, and the title would be "I'm an ass, you're an ass." and what he meant by that, at least I'm going to frame it towards what we're talking about, was a girl keeps getting disappointed by her mom or dad. It's not always dads. It could be moms too. I just said dad. Right. So my dad doesn't call, or my mom doesn't call. She's not showing up. She's spending more time with her new family. Yeah. So you can make it about you, and you can be upset and hurt and angry and frustrated and disappointed, and then have all that emotion traveling around with you. Or you could step back and like we've been talking about, and also
Mhm.
say there's a reason why your dad doesn't call. Not it's not just about you. It's also there's something going on with him.
Mhm.
I always tell them any normal dad, look at you. I say you're incredible. Who would not want to spend time with you? So the
Mhm.
reason that he's not is because he's sleepwalking. He's not fully awake. Anybody who is fully awake and conscious would want to spend time with you.
Want a
And
relationship with
and
you.
so I'm an ass, you're an ass to them means, with their dad in mind was, I'm not perfect. My dad's not perfect. I make mistakes. My dad makes mistakes. I'm an ass, you're an ass. And so I'm going to lower my expectations from him because I'm tired of being disappointed over and over. So it's if I can't get what I want, I've asked for it. I can still ask for what I want, but instead of having the expectation, I will just remind myself it's not about me. I'm not perfect. He's not perfect. He's missing out. I'm an ass. You're an ass. And if you lower your expectations, then you won't be so triggered when he doesn't call or he doesn't
Yeah.
remember you on Valentine's Day or whatever. So it's a way for them to kind of again be a little bit detached, maybe not be the right word, but kind of emotionally detached. I'm not going to take those emotions on. I'm going to leave it where it belongs.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe boundaries is the word you used before. Maybe boundaries is the word of, there's some, I'm gonna put some boundaries here.
Yeah.
I'm not totally attached to you, and you're not the only place I can get love. I can get love and appreciation other places, and you're kind of missing out by not getting that time with me. But I'm capable, and you're not, and so it's not
Yeah.
necessarily me.
It's your stuff. It's your issues. I'm not going to
Ah,
take it on. I'm not going to feel responsible.
yeah.
I may keep asking, but instead of having all these emotions wrapped up and then wham, I get hurt again.
Yes.
I'm going to
Mhm.
let go of the expectations for now, for
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
so it doesn't affect me so emotionally. And
Yeah.
the other thing that it helps girls is I've been running retreats and camps for 33 years. And
Yeah.
they're not camps for divorced kids; they're camps for kids.
Right.
It's camps for girls. All just regular old. If I walked into any middle school or high school tomorrow and just grabbed 20 or 25 girls at random, that's who's at our camp. And out of
Yeah.
those 25 random girls, how many would you guess have been through a separation or a divorce? Probably at least a fourth.
50%.
Yeah. Well, maybe. Yeah. I'm not sure by that age, but a
Yeah.
bunch of them. How many of
Bunch.
them have parents who don't get along very well? There's a
Bunch.
bunch of them.
Yeah.
And so, but be able to sit in a circle and share your story. And then someone says, I know how you feel. I went through the same thing 2 years ago. My parents weren't getting along. They were stressed out because of COVID and they were arguing more. I kept worrying, are they going to get divorced? So when they start to share their stories, they hear other girls' stories, they realize I'm not the only one going through this. I'm not alone. And even though as adults, we may assume, oh, of course they know that. They don't know that.
Mhm.
And they need safe spaces sometimes to talk and hear other people's sharing and stories to realize, I'm not the only one, and therefore I can get some support. It's okay.
So when they're in a group situation like that with you, um, do you see them encouraging each other? Really,
Absolutely.
each other, by hearing somebody else feels like that, and then they don't feel like the odd man out. They don't feel like
Yeah.
well, you're really neat, and your dad doesn't call you, and you're really neat, and your mom doesn't call you. Uh, maybe that's my story too.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Be
And
my
no, we don't
story
make
too.
anybody share, obviously, but I think that if you create, whether it's in your family, whether it's at my camp, whether it's wherever, if you create a safe place where kids feel like it's okay to be a little bit more vulnerable and to talk about things, then that's really helpful. It takes some of the edge off because they keep so much in because of
Yeah.
guilt and shame and stuff. So if they have a chance to talk about it and they're heard and they're understood and they're accepted and they're not judged and they get some feedback and they get some perspective and they get some nurturing, gosh, what a gift.
What a gift. They must feel like they're on cloud nine when they leave.
And every kid needs that. Every
They
kid
deserve it.
goes through adversities of different kinds. We're talking about a specific, one right now, talking about divorce, but most kids have been through something.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to share it, vocalize it, get it off your chest, get feedback, be heard, understood. A lot of kids I see who are going through divorces because their parents are so angry and distracted. A lot of times they just don't have it to be there in that way for their kids.
Mhm. Yeah.
And or they start dating and then they get distracted with that.
Yeah.
And, and then they bring a new person into their kids' lives.
I know.
I tell parents, I suggest to them, I would not bring your partner into your kids' lives until there's a ring and a date.
Yeah.
Because what happens for a lot of girls who I work with, and you've seen it 1,000 times more than I have probably, is that they date and the parent wants you to like this person, wants you to
That's
like
it.
this family, and we're all
Yeah.
going to be happy and
Yeah.
happily ever after, and then they break up,
Yeah.
and then there's another
Another
loss,
loss.
another
That's right.
loss.
And there's another loss. And how do you explain that one? Yeah. Oh, they didn't stay because they didn't like the kids. They didn't like us. They liked you, but they didn't like us. So that's why you lost that partner. Yeah.
And then you didn't have your mom
Yeah.
because she was so distracted with their new
What a
boyfriend.
great rule. Don't even introduce them until there's a ring and a date. What a great rule. I mean, that just like cuts it right to the quick. What a great rule. I remember not dating, like the last thing my child needs is another person,
Yeah,
man in my case, another man to come in and for her to try and please that man, because she was always
yeah,
trying to please dad. And so the substitute would be to please that man. And I didn't want her to have to try and do that. And
yeah,
there wasn't enough time to for me, working full time. There wasn't enough time to devote to a prospective partner, and also have the time to work and run a household and have time for my daughter. There was, in my life, I mean, some people can have 10 kids and have enough time for those kids.
yeah,
I just couldn't. And I had to choose, and there's plenty of time to date. She needs me right now. It's her
yeah,
and I during, and she was an only child, so she didn't have other siblings to go to. So I
yeah,
felt very responsible in, um, her time with me is her time with me.
yeah,
And that's all I have to give her. That's all I have to give her. And I'm not gonna take that away. I'm not gonna share that with
yeah,
somebody else. Plenty of time after high school, after she leaves for
yeah.
college. She's not gonna be needing me. Yeah. I,
So if
I
you only get to see your parent half the time, so if you go to your dad's house and you haven't seen him for 4 days,
yeah,
and then he's got someone there with him and or
yeah,
their kids, then of
yeah.
course you're not going to get all of him. You're going to get some of
Oh,
him, and
yeah,
he might be distracted and all that. So I don't tell parents don't date. Date if you want, but just date when they're at their mom's house or their dad's
yeah,
house.
right. Exactly. Don't move them in.
Yeah.
Don't let them take over the kids' bedrooms. Oh my gosh, that's their haven.
Yeah, I don't know if
Uh,
I don't know if people would agree with what I said. I'm just telling you from what I've heard for 30 something years of listening to girls is, and it'd be the same for boys, is that that's what they need. That would
Yeah,
people always say, I'll do whatever's right for my kids, whatever's best for my kids. Okay, well,
yeah.
in my experience, that's what's best for your kids.
That's it. Yeah, find out. Don't make it up. Find out what really is best for them. Have you seen a change over the years have you seen a change in children's reactions to their parents' divorce over the years, or is it pretty much human nature and it doesn't matter? It doesn't matter what year it is.
Well, I think,
That's a hard
right, I
question.
guess,
Think
no, well, I
about
think the only change is, and it's not that big, but because I'm not that old, is
it.
that 50, 60, whatever years ago, when divorce wasn't very common,
Yeah,
then if your parents got divorced, then it was unusual.
yeah.
Whereas like we said, if you walk into a typical, say, high school, probably, I don't know, a fourth-ish of them have experienced that
Easy. Mhm.
easy or whatever it's been. So it's it's talked about more. It's more okay for a lot of people to go to counseling.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's TV shows that have single people, so it's not as much of a stain or whatever, a shameful thing like it was 40, 50 years ago. So I think
yeah,
that's
where you
one
wouldn't
difference.
talk about it. Yeah.
But a lot of times kids, though, I still think they hold on to things because they're worried about sometimes sharing it with their friends because maybe their friends haven't been through that. So they would, quote unquote, never understand. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think a lot of times they feel that way, which is why they need some sort of context, some sort of place where they can
Outlet
talk and share.
where
I
it's acceptable. Yeah. Do you think the schools are doing much with that?
well, I think where schools are failing
Okay.
is they're not spending enough time. A lot like I work with girls. So I'll pick on girls. Girls need time regularly to sit down together, like a classroom of fifth grade girls or seventh grade girls, and talk and share and talk about how we're doing as far as getting along and giving them skills, allowing them to work through conflicts and make commitments to each other about how they're going to treat each other and talk about standing up for each other, all those sorts of social emotional learning things. That's so critical for kids to have those skills. And a lot of schools, I think, fail because they're like, well, we can't give you that much time because we have to prepare you for the test.
Let's learn
And
algebra.
you won't be able to if you miss over the next year 5 hours of school time, you've just kissed Harvard goodbye. I mean, there's almost like that attitude. The
Yeah.
hardest thing for us, we have a school program called Strong Girls, Strong World, where we go into and work with classrooms of girls or teams or whatever. The hardest the hardest part of that for us is getting the person at the top to say, this is important and we will make the time. Because if the principal says, I got it, I get it, it's important, and I want this for my kids, because there's a ton of data that shows that if they're sitting in that seat, stressed and worried about being judged, and they have no friends and they're feeling left out, and they sit by themselves at lunch and all that, they're not learning anything.
No.
So if the class is learns how to come together and build a stronger, trusting sense of community, everything's better. Their grades are better, their mental health is better, they feel more connected and close, and everything flows from that.
Hmm.
So I think that doesn't mean they should sit down with necessarily kids every day and talk about divorce, but I think they need a safe place to talk.
Yeah.
Like sometimes in our retreats, camps, even in the school program, one of the things that we do is we'll have them sit in a circle and we'll have everybody share one way that they feel different in a way that they don't like. Because sometimes you feel different and you like being different in that way, but sometimes you're like,
Yeah.
I wish I was more or less this or that.
Okay.
And there's almost always at least a girl or two who will say, I feel different because I've been through a divorce, or I feel different because I don't get to see my dad, or I haven't seen my brother for 2 years, or things like that. And so having circles where they can sort of voice that and not be judged lets them know maybe I can start sharing a little bit more instead
Yeah.
of holding on to it. Because if I keep holding on to it, it those emotions build up and then you're on overload. And when girls are on overload kind of with their feelings, it leaks out as anxiety and depression and sleeping problems and
Yeah.
stomach aches
Yeah.
and blah blah blah. There's a whole bunch of symptoms that
Yeah.
happen, not
Headaches.
because they have disorders, but because they're just full of emotion that's got to have some place to go.
Yeah. Wow. How interesting. And what a great point. And wow, it's not rocket science. We don't have to learn more about it. We don't need to invent some new medicine. We just need to give them time and opportunity and acceptance. And that can make a world of difference for them.
And just I mentioned earlier to listen
To listen.
because
That's
I
how it
think
started out. That's right.
a lot of times I
The
think a
first
lot of times
narrow
parents
down.
feel like they need to have some roadmap for their kids. They'll
Yeah.
listen. Their kids they may share about how they feel about the divorce or how they feel
Yeah.
how hard it is to go between houses or whatever, and
Yeah.
the parents too often go right to fix it mode. Well, then
Yeah.
let's do this, let's do that. And a lot of times,
Yeah.
girls tell me,
Yeah.
just like adults, it's true too. I just want you to hear me. I want
Mhm.
you to understand. I want you to get in my shoes for a moment, see it from my point of view. You don't have to agree because you're not me, but I want you to hear it and see it and understand it. And I may just need a hug. I don't need advice.
Mhm.
Or the
Mhm.
worst, I see a lot of girls where not necessarily about divorce. Sometimes it's about that or anything. They'll go to their moms and they'll be upset about a friend or they're upset with their dad or something. And then the parent makes it about them. Well, what do you
Yeah.
think? How do you think I feel? Your
Oh,
father left me and
oh,
here I am.
no.
I'm a single mom now. I'm working two
No.
jobs now. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God. It's always,
Yeah.
they just turn it around and make it about them.
Yeah.
That's not listening.
No, that's not listening. No. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I like that we that we did a roundabout all the way right back to your first piece of advice is to listen. These feelings are inside their head, and creating stories that are not necessarily true, but drive them and drive them to do things that they don't want to do, that they're not proud of. So listen to your children, listen to your girl.
That means be fully present.
Be fully present. There you go.
That's hard.
Thank you so much. That's such
You're
good
welcome.
information. Wow, I want to play this. I want to play this broadcast for all my clients in the lobby before they come in and see me. Like, okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready? This is what we're going to do. And your kids are not going to be the batting boy here. This isn't how you're going to use them. What great information. Thank you for sharing your years of experience, and you're really one of a kind, Dr. Jordan. I mean, not many pediatricians do this. So I don't know any other pediatrician that does this. So you're really one of a kind. And in closing, I want to mention that that Dr. Jordan has written several books that are just amazing. They are just amazing. Go to Amazon.com, type in his name. They're just amazing. I've read them. They're just amazing. What he's learned through the years. So they're wonderful roadmaps of how to. I think your last one is She Leads. How to raise daughters that can lead. They're fantastic. I also want to mention that if you have found this broadcast helpful, we will be putting it on YouTube. So if you want to see it again, and it'll have Dr. Jordan's name there and information of how you can get a hold of him. So we'll leave a phone number and or an email address. You can go to YouTube, type in Ask the Divorce Whisperer, and you'll see his picture and his name, and it'll have contact information under there in case you'd like to contact him to talk to him, some more, to find out some more of what he's learned in doing really the unusual work that he does, the very special work that he does.
If your listeners like podcasts, then check out, I have a podcast called Raising Daughters.
Tell about your podcast.
It's called Raising Daughters.
Raising Daughters. Okay.
It's called, you can find it anywhere you find podcasts on iTunes or whatever. It comes out once a week, and I interview authors. I talk about specific topics that have to do with what girls are going through. I was telling you earlier that the one that came out today, I interviewed 4 girls in high school because they were telling me, and they're in a group that I run. They were telling me how stressed they are about growing up, how worried and stressed they are. And so they talked for about 40 minutes about why people their age are worried about growing up. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Wow, it is, and can be so helpful to other teenagers who don't have access to you and don't have access to those groups, but they can hear about it. So awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for reminding me about the podcast. So
thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and be sure to look to YouTube, Ask the Divorce Whisperer, so you can review this again or show it to someone else, and check out his books and his podcast. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Best of all. Bye.